There's a man on this planet who does not live like other presidents. He does not publish a clear schedule. He does not sleep in the same bedroom twice in a predictable pattern. His motorcade sometimes drives to an airport, and the plane that takes off carries only staff. His security services coordinate flights that are meant to be seen and others that are never meant to exist. And somewhere beneath the forests and mountains of Russia, inside reinforced tunnels carved deep into solid rock, Vladimir Putin waits, not for diplomacy, not for negotiation, for survival. And Ukraine knows where those tunnels are. That single fact may be the most dangerous reality in this war. Not the artillery on the front lines, not the drone swarms over Crimea, not the sanctions strangling Russian trade. The most destabilizing development in this entire conflict is the quiet confirmation that Ukrainian military intelligence has mapped, tracked, and continuously monitored the underground shelters where Putin would go if Russia itself began to collapse. In May 2024, Ukraine's defense intelligence, the DIU, made a move that intelligence agencies rarely make during active war. They said it out loud. On national television, spokesperson Andrei Yusov calmly stated that the locations of Putin's bunkers are known, not guessed, not suspected, known. He added that this information is constantly updated. Then he gave Putin a nickname, Bunker Nye, the Bunker Man. He compared him to Count Dracula, retreating underground, hiding from the light. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't rhetoric. It was psychological warfare, delivered in broad daylight. And Moscow heard every word. Because when an intelligence service publicly reveals that it knows where an enemy leader hides, that's not a leak. That's a message. To understand why that message matters, you have to understand what these bunkers really are. They are not simple fallout shelters. They are not reinforced basements stocked with canned food. They are survival ecosystems. Entire underground command complexes designed to operate during nuclear war. Hardened communication lines, independent power grids, air filtration systems capable of sustaining life through chemical or radioactive contamination. Medical facilities, command rooms, escape routes. This is not a panic response built in 2022. This network began decades ago, and it never stopped expanding. Officially, one branch of the system is managed by a little-known agency called the Chief Directorate for Special Programs of the Russian president. It reports directly to Putin. It answers to no public ministry. It controls classified construction budgets buried deep within state contracts. Its only mission? Keep the president alive. It maintains secure facilities across the country, including sites believed to be in the Ural Mountains, near Sochi, and in remote northern regions. These are hardened installations meant to ensure continuity of government if Moscow falls or if Russia faces a catastrophic strike. But that's just the official layer. Behind it lies something more revealing. A second network, private, separate, hidden. Investigative journalists inside Russia traced construction contracts and uncovered something extraordinary. The same specialized engineering teams that worked on state bunkers were also assigned to projects that were never listed in public procurement systems, facilities not recorded in standard defense infrastructure reports. The workers were the same, the materials were the same, the tunneling equipment was the same, but the paperwork was different or non-existent. These weren't state bunkers, they were Putin's personal shelters, and their existence tells you something critical. World leaders build official emergency facilities. That's normal. The United States has continuity of government sites. China has underground command centers. That's what major powers do. What is not normal is constructing an entirely separate survival network that even your own official bunker administrators don't fully control. That's not preparation for foreign invasion. That's preparation for internal betrayal. When a leader builds private escape routes unknown to most of his own system, it signals a deeper fear, not just of missiles from abroad, but of instability at home. And that fear has grown since February 2022 because this war did not go according to plan. Russia expected Kyiv to fall within days. Instead, it became a grinding, attritional conflict. Western weapons poured in, sanctions tightened, drone strikes reached Russian soil, oil depots burned, military airfields were hit, and for the first time in decades, Russia's sense of internal invulnerability cracked. That is, when bunkers stop being Cold War relics and start becoming real. Since the invasion, Putin's movements have become increasingly opaque. Public appearances are sometimes pre-recorded. Meetings take place at unusually long tables. Flights are tracked, then abruptly disappear from civilian radar logs. Regional governors are informed of visits with minimal notice. Decoy convoys appear. Multiple aircraft with identical call signs take off simultaneously. Security patterns change constantly. All of this is meant to create uncertainty. But Ukraine has built its war strategy around removing uncertainty. Their intelligence services have proven repeatedly that they can operate inside Russia itself. They have conducted sabotage operations, assassinations, and infrastructure attacks deep beyond the front lines. They have penetrated military supply chains. They have mapped strategic targets hundreds of miles from Ukraine's borders. So when they say they know where the bunkers are, it is not an empty boast. It is a calculated psychological strike. Because once a leader begins to doubt the safety of his last refuge, his decision-making changes. Every movement becomes heavier. Every command carries new risk. Every general becomes a potential threat. If you believe the enemy knows your hiding place, you cannot rest inside it. You cannot fully trust the tunnels. You cannot fully trust the guards. You begin to move more frequently, and movement creates vulnerability. This is why that televised statement in May 2024 mattered. It wasn't about bombing a bunker. It was about entering Putin's head, and there is historical precedent for how stabilizing that can be. Leaders under siege often retreat into tighter circles. Information becomes filtered, paranoia increases, strategic decisions narrow, risk tolerance shifts unpredictably. The bunker becomes both shield and prison. And here's the critical detail. No one outside Putin's innermost circle knows exactly how many private shelters exist. Analysts believe the number exceeds what can be traced through official records. Some are likely attached to presidential residences. Others may be integrated beneath remote compounds in heavily forested regions. Some could connect to rail systems designed to move leadership discreetly across vast distances. Russia's geography makes concealment easier than almost anywhere else on Earth. But geography cannot hide from satellites forever, nor from human intelligence, nor from signals interception. Modern warfare is not just tanks and artillery. It is data. It is metadata. It is pattern analysis. If a secure communication hub activates in a remote region during a crisis, analysts notice. If power consumption spikes underground in a restricted zone, someone sees it. If specialized security units suddenly redeploy, someone tracks it. And Ukraine has proven it can connect those dots. The real danger isn't that Ukraine would strike a bunker tomorrow. That would be escalation beyond imagination. The real danger is uncertainty, because uncertainty destabilizes power. If Putin believes Ukraine truly knows every exit tunnel, every ventilation shaft, every reinforced corridor, then the bunker stops being absolute security. It becomes conditional, and conditional security breeds anxiety. An anxious leader is unpredictable, and unpredictability in a nuclear-armed state is not a small variable. This is the quiet layer of the war that rarely makes headlines. Beneath the drone footage, beneath the battlefield maps, beneath the casualty numbers, there's a psychological contest underway. Who feels exposed? Who feels hunted? Who feels safe? For years, Putin cultivated an image of control. Controlled media, controlled elections, controlled narratives, strength, stability, unshakable authority. But bunkers tell a different story. Bunkers are physical monuments to fear. You do not spend decades constructing underground escape networks if you believe your rule is untouchable. You build them because you understand how power ends. Sometimes it ends in defeat, sometimes in collapse, sometimes in betrayal, and sometimes in darkness. Ukraine's intelligence services understand that history as well. By publicly acknowledging their knowledge, they shifted the battlefield from territory to psychology. They forced a question into the Kremlin. What if we are not as hidden as we think? That question is corrosive. It eats at certainty. It spreads through security services. It forces constant relocation, constant verification, constant suspicion. And suspicion slows systems down. Wars are not won only by firepower. They are also shaped by pressure. And pressure applied at the right psychological point can ripple outward in unpredictable ways. Right now, somewhere beneath Russian soil, behind reinforced blast doors and thick layers of concrete and stone, lights are on. Security teams rotate in silence. Communication lines hum quietly. Air systems cycle through filtered currents. And in those rooms, maps of the war are studied. But perhaps now, for the first time in decades, the question is not just about territory. It is about vulnerability. Because when your enemy says he knows where you hide, you no longer hide the same way again. And in a war where perception shapes power, that may be the most dangerous development of all. On the Black Sea coast in Krasnodar Krai sits one of the most controversial properties in modern Russia. What investigative journalists have long referred to as Putin's palace, a billion-dollar compound perched above the sea, marble halls, private theaters, a no-fly zone overhead, a security perimeter that stretches far beyond what would be normal for a private residence. Putin has publicly denied owning it, but ownership is almost irrelevant, because beneath that palace something extraordinary exists. In 2023, Business Insider published construction diagrams that had briefly appeared online years earlier, posted by a Russian contractor, who likely had no idea what they were revealing. The documents showed two intricate tunnel systems carved beneath the estate, an elevator shaft plunging nearly 50 meters down through solid rock, reinforced corridors, independent water reserves, ventilation systems designed to function during contamination events, and cables, so many cables. A hardened communications network built to operate even if the surface world is burning. A former mining engineer who reportedly worked on the site described it not as a bunker, but as an anthill. He claimed there were at least 16 underground levels, a wine storage chamber on one floor, a loggia carved directly into the cliff face overlooking the Black Sea, a tunnel at the lowest level leading discreetly to a private beach exit. This is not simply a shelter, this is a palace beneath a palace, a statement in stone. If this is how one coastal residence is fortified, what does that tell you about the rest? Now travel east, over 1,000 miles from Moscow, into the Republic of Bashkortostan. There, rising from the southern Ural Mountains, stands Mount Yamantau. The name translates to Evil Mountain, not because of politics, but because of terrain. Swamps, dense forests, rocky slopes that once made herding nearly impossible. Bears roam the region. The environment itself is hostile. Nature built the first defense, the state built the second. Mount Yamantau has been one of the most persistent mysteries in global intelligence circles for decades. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, American satellites observed something unusual. Excavation did not stop. In fact, it intensified. Massive underground construction projects continued deep into the 1990s and 2000s. When questioned, Russian officials offered shifting explanations. First, it was a mining operation. Then, a food storage complex. Later, a repository for national treasures. The story kept changing. Around the mountain sits the closed town of Mezhgory, formed from 2 former Soviet military garrisons. Approximately 15,000 residents live there. Entry requires special permits. Outsiders are not welcome, and in recent years, satellite imagery has shown renewed activity. New roads, new infrastructure, new surface structures that suggest continued development below U.S. intelligence assessments have long speculated that a massive nuclear command facility lies beneath Yamantau, a continuity of government fortress built to ensure Russia's leadership could survive even the worst-case scenario. Russia has never confirmed that. But here is the deeper point. If it were truly just a mine, why restrict access so tightly? If it were only food storage, why expand decades after the Cold War ended? Secrecy itself becomes evidence. Now go further still, to the Altai Mountains in western Siberia, near the borders of Russia, Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan. Remote doesn't begin to describe it. It is over 6 hours by plane from Moscow. Vast stretches of wilderness, sparse population, limited infrastructure. Distance is security. In the Ongodaisky district, locals have spoken for years about unusual patterns. Presidential helicopters appearing without public announcements. Heavy security convoys moving through mountain roads. A compound known locally as Altaiskoye Podvorye, widely believed to be another presidential estate. And beneath it, rumors of a bunker so vast it could shelter up to 100,000 people. Whether that number is accurate is almost secondary, because what matters is scale. Reports suggest a high-voltage electrical substation was constructed nearby, powerful enough to run a small city. That is not required for a weekend retreat. That is required for sustained underground habitation. Imagine the scenario this implies. The sky over Moscow is no longer safe. Command centers are compromised. Major cities are under threat. Where does the elite go? 6 hours east, into the mountains. Into rock, into distance. Putin's family, his inner circle, senior Kremlin officials, key energy executives from Gazprom, strategic decision makers, all with space beneath the earth if the surface becomes uninhabitable. This is not paranoia, this is layered redundancy. Gelendzhik protects the Black Sea axis. Yamantau protects central command continuity. Altai protects remoteness and distance. Different geography. Different strategic logic. Same underlying message. Survival is not assumed, it is engineered. And this is where Ukraine's intelligence revelation becomes so destabilizing. Because if Kiev truly has updated coordinates, structural data, access routes, and supply dependencies mapped for these locations, then the psychological advantage shifts. It does not mean Ukraine plans to strike them. Such an action would risk unimaginable escalation, but knowing is power. If you know where leadership retreats, you can monitor patterns, you can track unusual communication spikes, you can identify which facility activates during crisis moments, you can determine where decisions are actually being made. In modern warfare, the command node is often more important than the battlefield. Destroying tanks weakens an army. Exposing leadership vulnerability weakens a regime. And the message Ukraine delivered in May 2024 was simple. We see the tunnels, we see the rock, we see the exits. Imagine sitting inside one of those underground rooms. Air filtered, walls reinforced, screens displaying battlefield updates. And somewhere in your mind lingers a televised statement from your enemy saying they know exactly where you are. That thought changes posture. It changes sleep. It changes trust. Security services must now double-check every perimeter, every guard, Every contractor who ever touched concrete, every cable that was laid. Movement increases, and increased movement creates exposure. There's another layer to this story, one rarely discussed. Bunkers are not only protection from foreign missiles, they are protection from domestic instability. History shows that regimes often fear internal collapse more than external invasion. A coup, elite fragmentation, mass unrest. When leaders construct private survival networks outside formal government oversight, it signals a particular kind of concern. A concern not just about NATO, but about loyalty. And that may be the most revealing detail of all. Because wars strain economies, they strain militaries, they strain political alliances. The longer a conflict lasts, the more unpredictable internal dynamics become. By publicly acknowledging knowledge of these shelters, Ukraine applied pressure not only to Putin's physical security, but to the perception of invulnerability. Power relies heavily on perception. A leader who appears untouchable commands obedience. A leader who appears exposed invites calculation. Right now, somewhere under Gelendzhik, generators hum softly. Under Yamantau, reinforced blast doors stand sealed. Under Altai, ventilation systems cycle through filtered air. But above ground, satellites orbit. Signals are intercepted, patterns are analyzed, and intelligence officers on the other side of the border update their maps. Not with speculation, with data. The bunkers were built to guarantee survival in the worst imaginable scenario. But no bunker was ever designed to defend against one thing, the idea that it is no longer secret, and once secrecy erodes, certainty follows, and when certainty fades in a nuclear-armed state engaged in prolonged war, the consequences ripple far beyond mountains and tunnels. They reach into strategy, into psychology, into the fragile balance between fear and control. Because the most dangerous battlefield is not always where the explosions happen. Sometimes it is where the leader sleeps. That is the scale of what is hidden out there. Mountains hollowed from the inside. Coastal cliffs carved into vertical labyrinths. Remote valleys wired with enough electricity to power underground cities. But even those massive shelters may not be the rooms that matter most, because the most important rooms are the ones nobody sees, the ones Putin is believed to be using right now, today, to run this war. According to reporting from the Times, Vladimir Putin no longer governs from the Kremlin in any traditional sense. The image of him seated beneath chandeliers in Moscow, presiding over long, polished tables, may be real, but it is no longer reliable. Instead, he operates from a network of identical operational command rooms. Same wooden table, same white walls, same green desk lamps, same pencil holders positioned in precisely the same place. Every object mirrored, every shadow replicated, every angle controlled. These rooms were built so that no one on a video call, not foreign leaders, not ministers, not even senior Russian officials, can determine where he physically is. It is architectural deception, a stage set designed to erase geography. The CIA has reportedly assessed that at least 3 such hardened operational bunker command posts are currently active across Russia. Possibly more. Each custom-built, each capable of independent communication with military command structures, each designed to function if Moscow itself becomes compromised. Think about what that means. A nuclear-armed state at war, whose leader may not be where the cameras say he is. His staff has been observed sending motorcades toward airports, security vehicles flashing, aircraft prepared, while Putin is quietly redirected somewhere else entirely. A decoy plane takes off, flight trackers light up, analysts speculate. Meanwhile, Putin appears on screen. He signs decrees. He authorizes arrests. He directs operations. He speaks to generals. And nobody outside a microscopic circle knows which mountain he is sitting under. This is who Ukraine is tracking. And tracking him is not simple. Putin does not follow predictable public patterns. He does not adhere to open schedules. Meetings are often recorded and released hours, sometimes days, after they occur. By the time footage surfaces of him at a desk in Moscow, he may already be deep inside a secure facility hundreds of miles away. Public geography and real geography have diverged. The Kremlin releases images, Ukraine studies metadata, timestamps, background acoustics, signal latency, communication relays. The DIU, Ukraine's defense intelligence, has been building this intelligence picture for years. Long before 2022, for over a decade prior to the full-scale invasion, the CIA reportedly trained Ukrainian intelligence officers inside underground facilities within Ukraine itself. They helped modernize surveillance capabilities. They helped create a new generation of operatives capable of operating inside contested space. One of the most significant programs was Unit 2245, a covert commando group tasked with capturing Russian drones and communications equipment from the battlefield. Their job was not simply destruction, it was exploitation. Every captured device fed into an intelligence pipeline. Encryption cracked, frequencies mapped, command structures studied, patterns extracted. And once that machine began running, it did not stop. It expanded, it refined, it learned. Part of what it learned, according to Ukrainian officials, was how Putin moves, where he retreats, how often he relocates, which facilities activate during escalation moments. When Yusov confirmed Ukraine's knowledge of the bunkers, he made one subtle but critical distinction. The information is continuously updated. That word changes everything. Continuously. That implies live inputs, active monitoring, ongoing sources, signals, human assets, perhaps both. It suggests that Ukraine's picture of Putin's underground network is not historical. It is current. That is not a small detail. Because in war, stale intelligence is nearly useless. Live intelligence reshapes decisions. And here is the strategic dilemma at the center of it all. What does Ukraine do with that knowledge? So far, Ukraine has demonstrated capabilities few predicted. Drone strikes on Russian oil refineries deep inside the country. Sabotage operations against military infrastructure hundreds of miles from the front. Incursions into regions Russia considered untouchable. Each operation required precision, timing, access, intelligence that was once assumed impossible. They had it, they still have it. But bunkers are different. A refinery sits above ground. A runway is exposed. A depot burns visibly. A bunker carved 50 meters beneath granite is something else entirely. The physics change. Penetration requirements change. Delivery systems change. And the consequences change. A failed strike on a hardened underground facility could trigger escalation, unlike anything seen so far in this conflict. A successful strike would create an even more unpredictable reality, because no one truly knows what Russia looks like the day after Putin is gone. There is no clear succession plan publicly visible. There is no obvious stabilizing figure waiting in the wings. Power structures inside the Kremlin are opaque. Security services compete quietly. Elite factions balance carefully. Remove the central node suddenly, and the system could fragment in ways that are impossible to forecast. That uncertainty alone is one of the invisible guardrails restraining escalation. But here's what matters most right now. The entire purpose of a bunker is psychological. Concrete protects against blast waves. Rock absorbs shock. Steel doors delay intrusion. But the bunker's deeper function is emotional. It gives the leader certainty. Certainty that no matter how chaotic the surface becomes, there exists a space beyond reach, a final layer, an ultimate fallback. And the moment that certainty cracks, the bunker transforms. It stops being an absolute shield. It becomes conditional. When Yusov stood on national television and said, "We know where the bunkers are, we know how many, and we update that information constantly," something shifted. The underground network stopped being invisible. It became known. And once something is known, it can be analyzed, tracked, modeled, contemplated. Putin built redundancy into geography, but he cannot build redundancy into doubt. Now, every descent into one of those tunnels carries a question. When the elevator drops him 50 meters beneath Gelendzhik, when reinforced doors seal behind him under Yamantau, when screens flicker to life inside one of those identical conference rooms, there is a thought that cannot be erased. Do they know I'm here? Do they know which mountain, which tunnel, which room? That question alone alters psychology. It changes sleep. It sharpens suspicion. It narrows trust. Security chiefs must reassure constantly. Engineers must recheck systems. Communications must be rerouted. Movement must increase. And movement, in intelligence terms, is visibility. This is warfare without explosions. No crater, no smoke, no sirens, just pressure. Relentless pressure applied to the most sensitive point in any power structure: personal security. The bunker man constructed an underground world designed to make him feel untouchable, an empire of reinforced stone meant to guarantee survival. But Ukraine has done something more subtle than striking it. They made it visible, and visibility erodes invincibility. Right now, when somewhere beneath Russian soil, lights are glowing in sealed rooms, maps are being studied, orders are being drafted, decisions about escalation and endurance are being weighed, and beneath all of it sits a quiet, corrosive possibility. The enemy may be closer than the rock feels. Because in modern war, power is not only measured in missiles or tanks, it is measured in information, in perception, in the ability to make your opponent doubt the safety of his deepest refuge. The bunker was supposed to be the final sanctuary. Ukraine turned it into another front line, and that front line exists entirely inside the mind of the man running this war. No explosion required.